make connections between your research and other areas? And how are leaders in your field pitching their work to big journals? Successful publishing researchers learn from their own mistakes. They learn from the mistakes of others. They are able to connect their research area, might be quite specific, to bigger, broader international questions that make their research broadly interesting to a wider readership, so it gets published in those international journals. My father, for example, he's an atmospheric chemist, works on reactions in the atmosphere. He retired a few years ago, but he only very late in his research career made the connection, or the connection was made for him actually by journalists phoning him up and asking him to comment on his research with climate change. He only made that connection quite late in his career. Maybe, he says to me, Gareth, if I'd made that connection between my research and the bigger, wider, internationally important question, maybe I would have published more papers in high impact factor journals. So take a moment to step back, think about how your research relates to those bigger, international, interesting, multidisciplinary questions. Authors, you and me, want speed with their publications. They want decent impact factors, of course they do. And they want lots of people to get access to the paper and be able to read it. So speed, impact factor, and readership are the three key things that authors around the world are looking for in their papers. So in terms of impact factor, you probably already know the major metric that's used internationally to assess both the quality of authors, researchers, and journals, as well as individual papers. The total number of times articles in a journal were cited over the last 2 years, divided into the total number of citable articles in that journal over that period, gives you the impact factor. But it's a
I'm no longer going for your.
It's a retrospect.
Is it when the sun is out, typical now?
Does somebody want to say something? Should I stop for a moment? We're okay? Okay, so journal impact factor is calculated retrospectively. So when you look at your own H index, when you look at your own journal impact factor index, you are looking at calculations that were made last year for that period of time, 2 years previously. So when we start to talk about maximizing the impact of our research as individual researchers, we're looking actually for other metrics as well as impact factor that give us a more immediate feel of what difference our research is making socioeconomically, potentially. So here's some information that we put together, looking at that circle again. Accessibility: can other users access content? Does your journal publicize your work once it comes out? What is the perceived expertise if you are thinking about how you can write an article that's going to get maximum citations? Big practical research. Think big. Publish with researchers who have maybe more experience, who can complement your knowledge. Publish in English. Use a simple writing style, as we've already talked about in this presentation. I can certainly come back and provide more training in the future on academic English and writing in a simple form. But it's important to remember that publications themselves do relate to impact, of course, but that's a retrospective measure. We'll talk more in a minute about how you can measure your immediate impact socioeconomically, but of course we count papers, impact factors, R indexes, H indexes. Our institutions, our governments, funding agencies want to count citations, they want to count circulation, but of course your research circulation may not necessarily translate to impact. As we've talked about already, how many people who read your work are actually going to cite your work? Aren't we interested in both metrics as researchers in order to measure what difference we're making socioeconomically? Of course, you can have a huge difference socioeconomically with your research, but it might not get cited, is the point that I'm trying to make. So impact factors, on the one hand, are useful as a metric for assessment, and we can't get away from them just yet because so many universities and institutions around the world use them to assess researchers, but I do encourage people to think a bit more broadly about what your research impact actually is, beyond which journals and how highly ranked those journals are in terms of your citations. So impact, viewed here from a great website that I recommend to you, fasttrackimpact.com. Academic, it's important, but that's really only about half the story, because of course, economic and societal benefits from our research are also very important. So impact really is the difference, the good that researchers do in the world. So you can think about this as what your reach, your engagement, how you amplify your research, how you bring people to action, how you cause that call to action, maybe for governments, maybe for other researchers, as you have that problem identification stage in your research, building on evidence, building on knowledge, but it has an impact. It has lots of different knock-on effects to other people around the world that go beyond just citations. So in order to ensure that you do have as much impact as possible, it's very important to talk about your research. As we talked about already in this presentation, you have to get online on those social media networks, on those channels, and talk about your research and tell people about your papers. Of course, the more people that find out about your research, the more times it's going to get read and it's going to get cited. This is another great resource that I encourage you to have a look at, the Kudos resource. You'll find that easily online. As you assess your impact as a researcher, you think about attention, interest, desire, and action. And you don't just think about your citations. You think also, and we'll come back to this in a moment, how many times your work has been shared, how many times your work has been mentioned online, how many clicks on your websites, how many views, how many downloads, and what kinds of press coverage potentially are you getting, how you can assess and use all of these metrics together as a way of thinking about your impact and maximizing your impact as a journey. I give you this. Take a screenshot of this slide. It's very good. It comes from the Fast Track Impact website. Again, if you have to write a grant application, if you have to go for a job interview, if you have to talk about a research project, you can visualize that research project as a journey. Your inputs, your activities, your outputs, your outcomes, and your impacts. How great would it be to be able to do all of this kind of thing as you move through your research journey and you talk about your research? That is what we're talking about today, building your impact as a research journey over time. And of course, don't forget, when it comes time to celebrate those publications, make sure you do make time to do that, because lots of researchers, in my experience, when they get their papers published, they think, whew, that's been a really, really, really traumatic experience, getting the paper through the journal peer review process, dealing with all the changes, finally getting the work accepted. They feel traumatized. They feel like it's the end of a process and it's just a big relief. Well, it's important to celebrate your achievements. Getting work published in international journals is something to celebrate. It's a fantastic achievement, so make sure that you do. I advise you to take time to celebrate that achievement before you begin the post-publication promotion process. And of course, as I used to do, sitting there and waiting for people to find your article is a bad strategy. You want to get out there and promote it, talk about it. International conferences, mostly, of course, online these days, but one day maybe we'll get back to that visiting people in person way of doing things on social media, press releases, and in the media. So important to discuss and talk about your research. So you can promote your published article. This is important. So people will read it, people will cite it. You can talk about new trends, identify what's hot in your field, and get the chance to network with other colleagues. And of course, you can do a lot of this online as well, meeting up with people, finding out what's going on, discovering new collaborations, finding out what will happen next in your field so you can tailor your research to maximum impact. And of course, one of the best ways to reach and increase the citations of your articles is to collaborate. Of course, makes a lot of sense. If I write a paper by myself, just me, then only my friends and network members will get to learn about that article. But if I write a paper with lots of other co-authors, then a much bigger network of colleagues is going to find out about the paper, is going to get the chance to read and use the paper. So in most fields, collaboration is associated, less collaboration is associated with less impact. We found that international collaboration has a strong positive influence on both journal placement and citation performance. Data show that the more countries involved in a collaboration, the greater the gain in impact. And another fantastic way to assess this yourself as your papers get published is, of course, by looking at Altmetrics. Here are the Altmetrics. They're those little colored wheels that you often see next to your articles once they're published. I was looking at a paper that came out today. Its Altmetric wheel shows 1 in the middle. That's just once it's been looked at on social media. You can see here, this paper published in March 2020 at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, 1,000 mentions, 50 times on news outlets, 12 times on blogs, 850 times on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, videos. So this is a way to assess the impact of your research in real time, immediately. So not waiting those 2 years for the journal's citation reports, but looking at what's happening to the impact of your work at the moment in real time. So very important. If you have access to journals, if you're going to choose a journal, we recommend, most journals are connected with this tool. You know, it's a great way to assess your impact in real time. Different ways that this searches public policy documents, mainstream media, blogs, and so on, to find out what's actually happening with research in the moment. The other way to maximize your impact, to build your profile, is of course to put yourself on many of these academic social media sites. ResearchGate, academia.edu. You can see my ResearchGate profile here. You know, there I am. We've all maybe got ResearchGate accounts. If you haven't, it's a great thing to sign up for as many of these academic social networking platforms as possible. LinkedIn as well is a great way to connect with other academics, meet people in your field and beyond, and drive up your reach, your impact on society, as well as in terms of citations. So sharing research, building connections, and making sure that you're out there and visible. The impact of your research is the difference that you make to society. Your project initiation, direct immediate results, intended impact, medium-term results, and then societal change based on project outcomes. You can, of course, also promote your research in traditional ways, putting it in the media, writing press releases as we used to do in the old days. That's still a great technique for making sure that people know about your research. If you feel you have something that's newsworthy, maybe the journal that you're publishing in will work with you. They'll decide if it's getting into a high impact factor journal, then potentially the work is newsworthy in and of itself. That's what you're aiming for as a researcher. So you are able then to increase your visibility, which leads to increased downloads and citations. You've actually got a responsibility as a researcher, potentially a publicly funded researcher. Many universities, grants, funding agencies are publicly funded. So we have to talk about our research. That's science communication. We get funding, we get support. We have to inform Granny, the bus driver, the people that we meet on the street about what we're doing, what the societal impacts of our research actually are, as we monitor and measure our impact over the course of academic life cycles. You should be signed up for ResearchGate. You should be signed up for all of these social networking sites. Google Scholar is another great way to track your impact in terms of citations. I'm sure everybody listening to this is on these kinds of sites, because you don't have to take care about your CV. You don't have to take care about this citation management for yourself, because these kinds of sites online will do it for you. And above all, I would say one of the best places to be at the moment is on the ORCID.org database. If you don't have an ORCID researcher identification number, then it's strongly recommended that you get one. This is a charity, it's a not-for-profit organization. It's a system that many, many international journals, increasing numbers of journals, are using. Maybe you've seen those little green ID badges next to authors' names. This tracks your outputs and ties you as a researcher to your published outputs, your reviews, and the grants that you may get funded as well. And imagine, from my perspective, searching for researchers in China, for example, and typing in common family names of Chinese researchers, I get thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hits on Google. It's very difficult often for somebody outside of a particular research community, a country or region, to identify researchers within that community. I'm sure you have the same problem when you're searching as well for international researchers. So this is the reason that this system exists. Mr. Smith, John Smith, in an English context, there's going to be gadzillions of John Smiths. You can tie down researchers. You can be easily identifiable, tied to your outputs, measure your impact. And by the way, more and more journals, as I mentioned, are requiring these kinds of IDs now for submission. So worth getting one, worth engaging with that system. So to return to my spaceman from the beginning of the presentation, we are aiming our research at our readers who have no spare time to read, want to read papers as fast as possible, get frustrated if they struggle with understanding, and will find most articles not to be essential reading. So think about how you target your work initially, your message, your audience, and also the writing structure before you get going with your next writing project. We can help, I can help. We'd love to join you at your university, members of your research group, virtually, of course. We can provide online training, webinar series. Just get in touch with me at the end of this presentation if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what we can do to help at EdAnts, in particular, to get things going, to kick things off, to begin with our collaboration. You can log on to the Learning Lab. I give you this login code if you go to learning.edants.com/IVPN-202104. I'll put that in the chat in a moment. You will be able to access all of our Learning Lab contents for free for the next 3 months. So have a look at that. You can get online. You can see a lot of our courses, infographics, searchable topics, and smart tools to help colleagues with their writing and publishing in English. EdAnts is quite a big company. We do lots of different things. We have a pharma division. We have an oncology division. We provide tools for researchers. As I mentioned already, you can get online. You can use our tools to help you with your manuscript writing, journal discovery, finding a target journal for your next paper. But we do editing. We do manuscript development, meta-analyses, content. We provide study design, statistical analyses, planning and strategy. So everything all the way across the life cycle of academic papers. So if you are interested in any of our services, let me encourage you to have a look at our website, edants.com. Thank you so much for the opportunity once again to give this presentation today. It's been my honor to meet everybody and have the chance to join you around the world, wherever you're listening to this from. I believe most colleagues are in Nigeria and West Africa, and thank you so much once again. It's my great honor to do this. My name's Gareth Dyke. You can email me at gdyke@edants.com. I'll put that in the chat box as well. And thanks again for the chance to do this. So I will mute myself and pass myself back to the moderator. Thanks again, and great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garrett, for that wonderful presentation. It's so enriching and it's so quite interesting. Do we have questions? If you have questions, I would like Mr. Azenge. Mr. Azenge, are you there, sir? Okay, let me see if there are questions here for you. Please, you can type your questions in the question box if you have questions. Then, Mr. Azenge, you're welcome, sir. Please, could you undo the question and answer, please, before I come back? Thank you, sir. Mr. Moses, could you please check your mic? I can hear you from here, sir. Garrett, can you hear him?
I can't hear anything. Sorry, I can hear you, sir, but I can't hear any questions.
Okay.
Sorry to say.
So Moses, could you please work on your audio and see if we can hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, I was saying thank you very much, Dr. Dyke, for the presentation. It is time for us to stand up and not sit and be waiting, as most of us are doing. Yeah, so we are going to take some questions. There is a hand up. Isimo has a hand up. Do you want to ask a question or? All right, so there is a question here I read. That was awesome presentation, Dr. Garrett. I enjoyed your presentation. Very lively and engaging. I listened with rapt attention. I got all the information you passed across. Thanks. Okay, this is a thank you note. We are asking if you have a question, please. Out of the hand up, do we have somebody with a question? You can unmute yourself and ask a question if you don't want to type. All right, so I would like to call on contributions. If there are no questions, I'll call on contributions. All right, there is a question. How does visibility transform into financial gain for the researcher? Right? How does visibility transform into financial gain for researchers? Dr. Garrett, do you want to take that?
Yeah, how does visibility, well, in terms of financial gain for researchers, I mean, that's a very interesting angle, I suppose, to look at. So are you doing research that could potentially be commercial? I mean, that's important. Like, if you have research that you feel could be patented or could be turned into something that could be monetized, then that's also very important. So in that context, I could imagine a situation where visibility or promoting the research before publication or before you've applied for a patent, for example, or protected the intellectual property could be a bad thing. So that's really an interesting way of looking at it. But of course, generally speaking, as researchers, in most cases, we are trying to be as visible as possible. We want as many people as possible to know about our research. We want as many people as possible to know about our publications. So translating visibility into commercial activity is interesting, and I think could actually be looked at in the opposite way. I hope that answers your question to some extent. I'm not sure it does, but it's a very interesting way of looking at things, and thank you very much for the question.
All right, there is another question here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, so there is a question. Kindly, what can authors do when a submitted manuscript has overstayed in the journal beyond the journal timeline? from submission to publication and no decision from the editors?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that question, Bartholomew. It's a very, very common question and a very common issue in academic publishing. I once did a workshop in China, and a lady in the audience put up her hand and asked me, I've been waiting for a decision on my submission for 2 years. What should I do? And I mean, in these situations, like, you must communicate with the journal. You must write to the journal. We always say that if you have to wait for more than 6 to 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks before you get back review comments from a journal, you should write an email to the editor. And I can give you templates. We can help you with the wording of those kinds of emails. But often editors just forget. Often editors are also academics working at universities, hospitals. They have lots of other things to do. And very commonly, papers can slip, through the cracks behind the sofa. Like, people forget about articles. So you, as an author, to answer this question, must communicate with the journal editor. Don't write an email. I get lots of emails all the time. I get emails that are quite aggressive, quite nasty. Where's my paper? What's going on? Be polite and try to be constructive when you write to the editor. A good strategy for doing this is to try to give something to the editor when you write to the editor. So, for example, I'm writing to inquire about my publication, my submission. Maybe there's a problem with finding peer reviewers. So let me give you 3 or 4 additional suggestions for potential peer reviewers that you could use, that could comment on my paper. That way the editor doesn't feel like they're being, squeezed by the author, and they feel that the author's helping the process. So that's a good strategy, but you must communicate. Don't wait, communicate, as I always say. The average time from submission to online publication is 90 days across the whole of the publishing industry. 90 days, that's 3 months. So if you're waiting longer than 6 to 8 weeks for reviews or for decisions, send an email. So thanks for the question, Bartholomew. I hope I was helpful with my answer.
Well, I still have some. I still have a couple. Because of time, we're just going to take like 2 and we proceed. So there is a question about funding. Somebody is asking about how do we collaborate to get research funding, and that I want to tie that with a question that someone asked about publication charges for most journals. That most of the people listening to us in this webinar are beginning researchers.
Sure. And
most of them do not have as much capability to pay for most of those. Is there something? Is there advice you want to give for probably MSc or PhD students or early researchers? On publication charges, or is it recommended journals that people can publish in free or something? What's your take?
So let's answer the second of those questions first, about article processing charges, as they're called, APCs. These charges that open access journals are asking us to pay to get our papers published open access, which of course is what most researchers want. They want their papers to appear online, free for anyone else to be able to download. Now, what the publishing industry often doesn't tell you is that all of the major publishers, all of the major journals will offer either discounts or waivers on those charges for PhD students, for master's students, and for people who are from developing countries or countries that are economically, disadvantaged. So it's always worth aiming your papers to the best journals that you can, without worrying about the charges initially. Okay, so that shouldn't be a consideration when choosing a journal. If you have work that you think is going to get published in a leading open access journal with a high impact factor, and we can help, by the way, with journal selection. Have a look at our journal selector tool on our EdAnts website. I'll put that into the chat as well. But once accepted, you will then be able to ask the editor, ask the journal, I'm a student, I can't afford to pay the charges. They will often, almost always, give you a waiver or a discount. This is what we used to do at my university back in the UK with PhD students. Just write to PLOS and say, I can't afford $1,500 publication charges. I'm a PhD student. They would always say, don't worry about it, no problem. So, you know, that's the first comment. The second comment is to collaborate as much as possible. Of course, collaborations internationally will lead to access to those major networks, those major funding networks where you can access research funding. A big one, of course, is the European Union. The European Union is a fantastic resource for research funding. You don't need to be based in the European Union to apply for European Union funding. You just need to be working with somebody who is based in the European Union. So you can build a network. I can give maybe an additional presentation one day about how that kind of thing can work for researchers. If you have colleagues in the US, in China, in South America, in Europe, there will be big transnational networks. There are big transnational networks that can leverage research funding. World Health Organization, for example, you know, like these kinds of big organizations, the European Union, as I've mentioned. So yeah, collaboration's the key in order to manage that. So thanks for the great questions. Thank you for those.
All right. Sorry. One last one before we move. Yeah. What is the current status of the different lists predatory journals by Bell? This has created a lot of setback. Yes, by Bell. This has created a lot of setback for researchers.
Yeah, so Beale's list, Jeffrey Beale was a librarian at the University of Colorado who started to create like one of the first lists of predatory journals in the 1990s. He assembled a list of journals that were just interested in taking people's money and not interested in proper peer review or listing or databasing. And of course, the current status of this list is that it's frozen in time. 2017, the list was ended. So lots of journals, lots of very reputable journals ended up on that list. Scientific Reports was one for a while, some of the Chinese government journals, for example, and people fought hard to get their journals off the list. It's very difficult once you're on one of these blacklists to get your journal off. But I wouldn't look at Beale's list anymore because it's out of date. Have a look at the directory of open access journals. Have a look at resources like Think, Check, Submit as a resource for determining where you should be thinking to publish your articles. So let me just put this. thinkchecksubmit.org is a great resource for everybody to find a place where you can determine where you might potentially be able to publish your work while avoiding predators. Great question. Thank you so much for the question. Thank you for all the questions.
All right. Somebody want to ask a question? I'd like to allow Dr. Beckley to ask his question quickly. He's one of our resource person, one of the speakers after you.
Okay. Great.
Hello, Dr. Beckley. You can go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Garrett, great lecture. I just want to ask this question. Incidentally, I am a member of the advisory board of up to 3 or 4 journals, and I know that sometimes we get faced with the issue of getting the right persons to review articles.
Right.
I don't know whether this is the same problem you guys face over there. Because sometimes when I send manuscripts to good journals, the kind of feedback I get from reviewers are really very embarrassing. Sometimes you just ask whether they really know what they're doing. So my question is, do you guys really also have that problem over there? Say you send somebody in plant biology, sends an article to a journal, and then the journal manager sends that same article to somebody who has technical know-how in zoology, not in plant biology, to review such journal. Do you have that kind of problem over there?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. Absolutely. That's a universal problem, I would say. Like I have at our journal, like a big problem often finding appropriate peer reviewers. And sometimes we have to ask lots of people before we get people who are prepared to review. I mean, it's a big problem in the publishing, academic publishing, like around the world, like because of course most people doing peer review are doing it as part of their busy lives. They're doing it like as a service to journals, but of course that's how publishing companies make all their money, like by publishing content and selling it to people. So yeah, I mean, managing peer review, selecting reviewers, that's another big area of training and could be another potential presentation or series of training webinars that we would love to provide if that's of use to anybody listening to this, because not just from a journal editor's perspective, but from a researcher's perspective, how to select peer reviewers and manage the process, very difficult, and people just don't get any training in this. Like they're just expected to go off and publish papers and be successful as a researcher without any training in the process. So yeah, I hope I answered your question. I had some difficulty hearing, I'm afraid, but thank you for the question.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great. Dr. Dyke, thank you very much. There are a lot of people that want to ask questions, but we need to move on. But I see that this question is very critical, being that we have had for people who may want to work with you. So yeah, there is a critical question here about how can intellectual properties of researchers be protected with the use of service companies such as yours.
Yeah.
So you run this up and then we move on. There are a lot of questions, but we can take more.
So yeah, so if you work with us, if you work with a company like ours, like all of our editors, all of our researchers who work on research projects, who develop research projects, who help researchers to write up their papers, select journals, get their papers published, everybody is subject to confidentiality agreements, and everybody's subject to contracts. So there's no possibility that your work would be, the confidentiality or the intellectual property of your research would be breached. I mean, we are one of the leading, if not the leading company working in this area, author support, research solutions. So we have lots of people who want to work with us. So it wouldn't be in the interests of any of the people that work with us and for us, helping researchers to edit their English, helping researchers to develop projects, develop ideas, develop concepts. That's all of the work that we do. So we never have that problem. We never have that problem. And yeah, I mean, your intellectual property is protected absolutely by the agreements that we have. Thanks for the question. And
fantastic.
We'll see you in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Dyke. I guess if we will have time in the end, most of this question will come up again, but we like to go on by, I think, and I trust that you are hanging on, because by the end of the day, we want to present a certificate to you. So please hang on with us. So at this juncture, without further ado, I'd like to call on the next presenter. Hello? Yeah, I'd like to call on the next presenter, Dr. Beckley. Sir, are you in the house again?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Dr. Beckley is going to take over. Dr. Beckley happens to be my boss. We run a journal together. He happens to be my boss. Welcome, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Can you hear me?
Dr. Beckley, could you just
Yes.
share your screen now? Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. Can you enable?
Okay, I can do that for you here,
I'm
sir.
not able to. All right, good. I'm sure you can see my screen, right? You can see my screen. No, can I continue?
Yes, please continue. Please continue. Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, so I want to thank the organizers for the opportunity to make this presentation. Sorry, I was off and on. My PhD student had this synopsis presentation as well as one of my MPhil students. So that's why I didn't start with you guys. I was just off and on. So great to be here. I will be talking on the research design and data analysis for optimum output. This is really important because I'm sure that every one of us seated here, every one of us on this platform, listening to the lecture, particularly those who have participated in the first lecture by tonight, would agree with me that if you really didn't do good research, then there wouldn't be any reason for you to publish. Because if you send that to any reputable journal, they'll send it back to you. But from the topic, 4 critical keywords pop up: research, design, data, and analysis. And incidentally, design, data, and analysis are all wrapped up in research. You couldn't say you do research if you didn't design. You couldn't also say you do research if you didn't collect data, classify the data. And how would you present such research outcome if you didn't know exactly how to analyze it? Now, by the way, what's research? Very funny the way I put it on this slide. On 2 words, read and search. Now, I'm sure a couple of you listening to my lecture would have written 1 or 2 documents where you begin the title of maybe a memo you want to write to a director or to somebody. You read would mean with reference to, say for example, I want to respond to a query. Obviously, we put a read in front of that heading to say that my response was in reference to such previous letter. Read also mean repeated activity. Now, search is to seek and to investigate or to explore or to inquire or to find out. So if you put them together, then it means that research will definitely be repeated, purposeful investigation. The funny thing is, by the way I've defined research, it means it never ends. Sometimes you think that it's voila, eureka, you found you got to the point where sometimes you set up objectives and if you reach those objectives, at the end of the day, you actually find out that you need to do more. So research
can you hear me?
Yes. Am I not very is my network not clear?
No,
can you not hear me?
You are not audible. You are not audible.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's better now. It's better.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think it's my network.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll continue. Now, Socrates, the great philosopher, made just 2 words that continue continues to baffle the international philosophical community. Man, know thyself. And the thing is, for every man, there's always a need to know something, not just about himself, to know more about his environment, to know about those around him, situations around him. So questions like, where am I? Where am I headed to? What is truth? Which way is better? Which is which? What is what? Questions like that. And then the big question is, sometimes you ask yourself questions that will begin with who? Who did that? What is that? What is your name? Why are you coming here? How are you? When did that happen? All these questions point to uncertainty. And you agree with me that because the point of uncertainty, then definitely there must be the need to find solution. But then, why would man search? What is the drive for research? I've outlined 7 reasons why perhaps it's important, or perhaps why people would want to do one research or the other. The first is to satisfy curiosity. You just want to know. The second is to expand knowledge. You know, but you want to know more. The third is to solve a problem. You may be involved in your research because perhaps, say, like I am a plant biologist, you say you have low yield for a particular variety, and that's really a problem. And then you want to find out why that's a problem, how it's a problem, and how to solve it. The second is that they want to establish reliable guide, protocols, or maybe future determinations. Another reason why you do research is to predict a concept or an issue, or perhaps even to explain the concept and an issue. And then finally, the reason why we do research, we need to advance the we want to find cure for a disease, we want to find solution to the problem, we want to gather publication so that you become a professor. Those are reasons why we see. Now, funnily enough, not in any way to sound too ridiculous, the holy books actually points to research. For example, in the Bible, in Deuteronomy 20, makes mention, repeatedly uses the word inquire, search, analyze, conclude. Those are synonymous. Even in that Quran, where it says, "My Lord, enrich me with knowledge." Now, many times research, both as a word or as an act, usually will look vague to many people. But you must understand that research begins first with a great idea. I'm sure all of you can see the photograph in front of you. So suppose this was rain. I placed it in front of you and I said, just make me a type of salad, fruit salad or vegetable salad. And then you get a cheap price. So I give you $1,000. I'm very sure you will definitely come up with something. But you must understand that whatever you're going to come up with, especially if I had said that the drink price would be dependent on whose ever salad was the most, the best or the best. You would agree with me that your preparation will be wrong. It's definitely will be well thought out. So you must agree, therefore, that for you to be able to achieve such a price, the first conviction that you are sure you attain the best price, from this venture that I just showed, you have to be in familiar terrains. Suppose we were 10 and 2 were caterers, you agree with me that the price would definitely, be within those 2 people because it's within that terrain. So the question is, what's stopping you? Now, I have developed a small research process model, and from this, it's almost common with what is available on the internet. First, we always will start with decision making. But the thing is, something pops up, and then you decide first to ask the question. Somebody else made a statement, really fun. He said, if you decide not to decide, you have actually decided. So research normally starts first with decision. So you decide. So you make the decision and then you ask the question. You must understand first that before you ask the question, you ask questions from a pool of ideas, a pool of knowledge. So it means that you definitely must have background information of what you actually ask the question about. And then the next is that you define the problem. Having defined the problem, you are able to define the problem, by defining your problems, you set out research questions, problem statements, design problem statements. These problem statements are exactly what will drive the entire research process. And then eventually present research objectives. Your research objectives are usually a part of the program. Actually, they are guides, the program statement and guides the development of the research objective. Every parameter you seek out is eventually tied to those research. Every finding in the research is actually tied to the research. And then eventually, once that is done, you design the research, and then you collect data, you analyze the data, you evaluate the findings, and then you make conclusions, and then you disseminate. And you must also understand after dissemination, you also make decisions whether you need to continue with that study or you need to stop. And then the process goes on. Now, if you look at the slide, you observe that circle out three aspects: design, collect data, and then analyze data. For me, this is critical in the research process. Now, I use that to develop the three methods tool movement, where I said no research, the research itself is seen like the three methods tool. If you take out one of those legs, then it won't. So that means that for you to say that research is actually done and a very good design for such research, you are able to have the right tool and capacity to collect data, and then we should be able to analyze those data. But you must also know that this is a skill of set of skills that you only will obtain in any branch of statistics. But this is only three, going down to statistics. Right? So let's take that one at a time. Design. Design, as we know, is in research design. We see research design like somebody who wants to build a house. You want to build a house, you definitely don't just build the house random. Otherwise, you waste your entire fund and you end up building nothing. So the research design is almost like the architectural design, that architectural masterpiece that you use and then format to make that. So I say it's a blueprint that guides the execution of any research activity. The research design must contain first the plan of the research. It must also explain how structured the research is, and also the strategy in which to adopt. Now, I have said that every design will rely definitely on there are a lot of research, different kinds of research. It could be a correlational study. You want to see how one particular factor relates to another factor in the environment. It could be maybe a field survey, the experimental, the study with the quantitative, or just meta-analysis. You want to accumulate literature and then make decisions about those literature. But you must understand first that for you to say you have made the right and you made the best of the design, that draft design must first emanate from a good research question. I've said before, the research question is what actually guides the entire process of research. It's what guides the methodology. I could have a full lecture on how to develop good research questions. I'm limited by time, so I just. The second is that your research design draft must be able to identify and control extraneous factors. Because whether you like there are certain factors in the environment that affect. Let me give you a good example. If, for example, I want to say I look at the effect of a specific fertilizer regime. So I want to, sorry. Coming. So if I say I want to look at the effect of say a particular fertilizer regime on plants crop development, the fertilizer is different kinds of say nitrogen, phosphorus, and NPK fertilizer. That eventually is the only, if that is the only treatment I want to apply in the study, I must understand first that there are going to be different extraneous factors that may affect the outcome of that study. First, the specific factor, the soil, wind, various environmental factors. So it means that when I'm designing the right, I want to put on the right design, I must be able to identify all these factors and then put them into play. I must determine the right, research plan that will put all these factors, either account for these factors or not the factors. Now, the third assurance that you have a good research design must provide results that are generalizing. And somebody should be able to replicate your research and provide similar results. And then your design should be able to assure efficient use of available resources. It's almost like when you do a research proposal for a grant, and then you are before me and I ask you, how would you guarantee that you're not going to waste this money? And then you don't know what to say, perhaps because you don't have the right research. Now, it's really important for us to have the right designs, because if we don't put the right designs in place, then the possibility exists that we may have errors at the end of the story. So we have the type 1 and type 2. Sometimes in reality, you want to compare what you have, the outcome of your research, you want to compare it to reality. You have type 1 errors, you have the type 1 error. Say the effect of what you determine in your study actually never exists in reality. You found it to exist, then you concluded that it existed based on that could be type 1 error. All that. These errors usually important because of what research design. Now, there are 3 keys that you must put to note if you want to design a study. And I can bet you that most designs come first from, some of us just sit down and develop a particular topic and then start design. I know a lot of people run from that, from topic to design, some from design to topic. But let us assume we want to really design topic. 3 key factors, 3 key decisions must be made. First, is that you have to consider the measurements that you want to do. Usually, I call that responses. And then the next is that what conditions to study. You also need to consider the conditions you wish to study, which we regard here in this case as treatment. And then the third is you want to also look at the experimental materials or the units. So I give an example. Suppose if you look below the title and say you want to look at the effect of changes in soil pH on the bioremediative capacity of pseudomonas using an enzyme, the hydrogenase enzyme. So that means that if I was to subject them to this particular plant that will enable me to make the I'll break them down into the treatment, the response, and the something will guide the topic. So, for example, in this particular topic, the topic cannot be broken down to what is the effect of changing soil pH. That is the treatment, because in this case, the soil pH is the treatment. And then in this, the response factor that I want to consider, which will be the condition for the study, is investigating the bioremediative capacity of pseudomonas. And then the units, experimental materials to be used, with which I would use to check whether the response, was in line with what I have placed there, perhaps earlier in my hypothesis, would be using enzyme dehydrogenase secreting capacity. Now the thing is this. With the treatment, I should be able to now say, okay, suppose I want to make a very nice design. Just like what I have earlier said, I said your design should be able to exclude or take the notes, extraneous factors. I should be able to tell in this particular experiment what will be the factors that will influence soil pH. Because in this case, the only thing I want to influence soil pH is the enzyme, which is the unit. So what I'm saying in essence, you should be able to tell if the treatments, is eventually influenced by any of these factors. Then The other thing we need to consider are the following. Say, for example, these types of data sources. What kind of data source would I be needing in this experiment? Would I be needing constants? Would I be needing variables? Even if I do need variables, what kind of variables? Later on in the slide, I will explain exactly how constants and variables affect the presentation of research outputs. Also, factors that can affect sources of ability. There also cost within the budget. Now, in planning our study, I'll need us to look at three basic statistical requirements for good experiments. They are randomization, replication, and then local control and blocking. Now, for randomization, I said this is the process where it is ensured that each treatment has an equal chance of being assigned to any experimental use. Whereas for replication, each treatment is being applied to, this is a situation where you apply a particular treatment to more than one experimental use. This is important because you'll be able to tell if treatments that are applied in the study eventually will have representative outcomes. Now, where local control or blocking is important is especially when you are very sure that you may have extraneous factors, that may be coming into play to influence the general outcome of your study. So when planning the research, it's important that you put randomization into play, replication, at least you have not less than 3 replicates, and then the possibility for blocking and then local control. Now let's look at data collection. Now, depending on the type of research, there are several tools that can be used to collect data, but you must all understand first that all hindrances to data collection are first addressed by the research plan. You have to be sure first whether replication was properly handled, or whether you randomized, or what kind of randomization measure you undertook. Now, there are different data collection tools. The first are interviews. By the way, when I say data collection, in this particular case, we are already in research, so we want to collect data. So that, because by the time we make decisions will be based on the kind of data we collect, the amount of data we collect, the regularity for data collection. But what kinds of data are available for collection? First, we say that interviews. The second, the observation. Say experiment in the laboratory, experiment on the field, in the farm, that's an observation. Also be a survey. Also be meta-analysis. You can collect data just strictly based on literature review. You want to compare situations that have been published in, say we want to look at review a particular aspect, say like the incidence of a particular disease over a period of 50 years. So you want to see how researchers are able to put forward explanations about such disease. That would be data analysis, what we call meta-analysis. And for such meta-analysis, your data collection tool is usually literature review, as we have available. Then another data collection tool are focus groups. Now let's look at this. We also have another set, another kind of data that we call qualitative and quantitative. So that when you are in the field, you understand the kind of data you need to get. But that will also affect the kind of study you want to do. Say, for example, when you say data is quantitative, it means that some data can be counted. It can be expressed using numbers. For example, age. I want to determine age range. For example, I look at currently we have 41 participants here, and I want to analyze the age range of participants here. That's quantitative data. But if the kind of data I'm looking for are descriptive or conceptual, say for example, I want to see skin color for participants in this webinar, then that's qualitative. You must understand that by the time it comes to analyzing such data, you don't analyze quantitative data the same way you analyze qualitative. Now let's look at data analysis. Now, before the data is analyzed, one, you ensure first that data integrity is ensured. You want to be sure that there were no manipulations, that there are manipulations or there were manipulations, or there were too much error, too many errors during the execution of the study, then you can be rest assured that the entire process will be flawed. I mean, the process of analyzing it. Then you also want to be sure to separate quantitative data from quantitative. I have said before, since you will not analyze them the same way, since quantitative data will refer basically to conceptual or descriptive concepts, whereas quantitative data refers to numerals, numbers, counting, data related to counting of measurements, data measurement skills. Then obviously you will not be able to analyze them at the same time. So you have to separate qualitative from quantitative data. Now, something is very key, which is the third point to be considered before you analyze data. That is the test for normality of data. Sometimes you gather data, sets of data, particularly the quantitative data, and you don't really know whether those data sets either follow a normal distribution curve pattern or not. You also will not be able to tell if those data were parametric or not parametric. The reason is because you cannot analyze parametric sets of data using the same tool as you analyze non-parametric sets of data. And the only way you tell if the data sets were parametric or non-parametric is first that you subjected them to test of normality. Now, there are a whole number of, a lot of data analysis software that you use to analyze. I'm sorry, my lecture will not be to teach you how to use any of those data sets. Perhaps if the opportunity comes, I'll be glad to perhaps show you how to use any of them. We have a lot, SPSS here, PAST, Unitam, Strata, MATLAB, GenStat, a whole lot. But you have to first understand this. There are two different kind of statistical software. The first is what you call the open source statistical software. For open source statistical software, they are free. You can just use them. You don't have to download. You can just go to the internet and then use. And then you analyze your data. But we also have the closed source statistical software. In this particular case, these ones divided, licensed. They are not subject to anyhow use. They are subject to different licensing procedures, like the common SPSS or most of the ones are placed on this screen are usually within the closed source. Now, I have mentioned before, if you recall, I have mentioned before that before you start any research, before you analyze your data, you must first be sure that the data sets were subjected to normality test. Let me state this. Subjecting your data to normality test only affects quantitative data, not qualitative, because qualitative will just mean looking at data based on visuality, characteristics. Are they tall? Are they short? Are they fair? Are they black? And all that. For such sets of data, you just want to check first. Maybe you can use chi-squares, to see whether you have the right kind of distribution before you go for that to analyze. So that at the end of the day, it's not as if that the outcome was rather subjective. So when you subject your quantitative data set to normality, there are different statistical tools for testing for normality. We have QQ plots. QQ plots. The QQ plot is usually with SPSS. We also have the PP plot. You can also just plot a simple normal distribution curve and then test the normality based on skewness, the level of skewness, or the level of kurtosis, the normal distribution curve. Now, if the normality of data shows that the data sets were normally distributed, that's if you subject them to a normal distribution curve, and the point is that it is normally distributed, then obviously it means that you have a parametric set. So in this particular case, you'll be looking at descriptive statistics that are location based, like mean, standard deviation. You can conveniently do relativity statistics, differential statistics. You can do the normative testing. You can do diagnostic tests. Kind of distribution, one and all that. But if the data sets were not normally distributed, then we would say that such sets were non-parametric, and so we would use the non-parametric statistics to analyze the data. For example, if you were to do a t-testing, then most likely you do the Kuster-Wallis t-testing. There are also non-parametric measures for determining relativity or inferential forms of statistics. Then for descriptives, for a non-parametric set of data, you couldn't present results as mean because the data sets were non-parametric. But instead, you present them as a measure of dispersion. So for such non-parametric data, what you do is that you present the results as median or in percentiles so that you see the level of dispersion. But you must understand this. It is not also as if you must know that if your data sets are not normally distributed, it is not a nail to the cross. It does not mean that you will stick with the non-parametric type of statistics. No. You also have another option to return the non-parametric set of data to the parametric form. So what you do, you can convert or you can transform that data to parametric sets. There are different measures for transformation of non-parametric sets of data. For example, you can log transform. You can transform by any kind of statistical equation. And then at the end of the day, you can back transform to the original set so that you can now analyze using the parametric statistics. Now, there are different available statistics for analyzing. I said before, you have descriptive statistics. The descriptive statistics you'll be looking at mean, median, mode, that's dispersion. Because if you want to measure areas of central tendency, or you want to measure areas of dispersion. So areas of central tendency or areas of mutation, perhaps you'll be analyzing for mean, and then also see how dispersed the mean is from the standard error. So perhaps what you call SEM, the standard error for the mean. Then for measure of dispersion, you can present some data like you want to see how highly dispersed the sets of data are. You present such descriptive forms in percentiles, 90 percentile. I mean, if you want to present them in graphical forms, then that is when you use what we call the skew, the box and whisker plots. So you can use box and whisker plots to show how dispersed the sets of data. Now, other kinds of statistics also include inferential statistics. You want to be able to tell what the first inferential association statistics include regressional models, linear models, correlation, any kind of statistics that enables you to compare one particular factor with the other. You want to be able to tell if the application of a particular treatment in an experiment influenced or associates with a specific type of outcome. These kinds of inferential statistics. We also analyze variances. We can analyze variances in three ways. We can analyze variances using a single factor, what we call a one-factor ANOVA. The single factor ANOVA will come if you are sure that there are no extraneous factors. And usually, the only way to knock off extraneous factors in the experiment is to put them up together to get a composite sample. Like, for example, you get source from 10 locations. You put all the source together and then divide again into 10. By such way, you would have removed extraneous factors that would have been assigned to differences in soil collection points. You know? So because you assume homogeneity of your experimental plot, you adopt a one factor on it. If not, then perhaps you want to look at the effect of blocking, or you also want to look at interactions, you know, between treatments and treatment units, and then environmental factors or other external factors. Then you do a two-way maneuver. Otherwise, you can also do what you call maneuver or multivariate analysis. Now, from multivariate analysis, you can also progress to, you know, one CCA, principal component analysis, clusters to be able to also see associations. And then there are other forms of statistics for which you can be able to diagnose, like medicine, even in finance, through ROC, as called. There are several kinds of statistics that you can actually analyze. But I can assure you that this lecture will not be enough to teach you how to analyze those sets of data. So you need a statistician to show you. But thanks to the internet, YouTube can be of help. Manuals or mentors can be of help. So I want to analyze my data descriptively. Where do I go? You can go to YouTube. Subscribe to any formidable statistics channel that will teach you how to use any of these forms of statistics. Let me just quickly run through this. I said before, there are two kinds of statistics, descriptive and inferential. When you say descriptive, you actually refer to summary. Summary statistics that is used to organize or describe the entire package. But in inferential, you are actually looking at making decisions based on the face of uncertainty. That's in the face of uncertainty. You want to make decisions. And some decisions will depend on association amongst the sets of data. Those are. Now, I had also mentioned that I will explain the effect of constants and variables. Well, a constant is a constant. So, if you want to take that, say for example, age. I mean, a constant, for example, is maturation. So I could take maturation as a constant. Sets of data for constants. We all know that the age of puberty, I know that varies, but okay, let's take temperature. You could say somebody has fever if his temperature is above 37 degrees Celsius. So if I was to look at such situations, then that is a constant because I already have just one particular one that runs through an entire set. But because I'll have distinctions in the sets of data that I seek, for, now there are two kinds of data. Variable can be qualitative, as I mentioned before. Qualitative because they are categorical, they are not counted, or they are quantitative. Now, quantitative variables can be descriptive. They can be discrete. They can also be continuous. Age, for example, is an example of a continuous variable because you cannot tell at what point the one dies. That's continuous. It can continue to rise. So, but when you have variables that have terminal periods, for example, parents. Okay, let's say number of meals somebody can have in a day. That's not a continuous variable because it's possible that if a person, because a day, you have 24 hours in a day, it means if the person eats every second, then obviously there must be a time when it ends for that day. That will be every second for the next 24 hours. So that's discrete variable. Or you want to look at the number of deaths in a population. That's discrete variable because you can put a point in the pen on it. But for age, for weight, you couldn't because in the population it's possible that age will just continue. So what happens? You are the one that puts that stuff. Now, let's say you have analyzed your data. How do I present the data that I have analyzed? You can present the data numerically, you can present the data graphically, you can also present the data mathematically. Now, when you say mathematical, that's presenting them in mathematical. For example, if I did a linear model, I wanted to show a relationship between one particular factor and another particular factor, then I probably will use a mathematical, either a quadratic equation or a linear equation. like the common y equals to mx plus c expression. That's a mathematical way of presenting. Or I present it in graphical form. Now, if I present data graphically, then there are different ways to present it. Say, for example, if I have discrete data, I couldn't use you have for graphical presentation, you have lines, frequency polygons, frequency curves, histograms, and all that. So if I wanted to present a discrete data, I wouldn't use a line graph to present a discrete data because they are terminal. So rather, I use either I use polygons or I use bar charts. But if I needed to present a continuous way, because it's a continuous set, I want to see the level of progression along it, just to test for progression, see how it progresses. And obviously, I will need a line graph that will easily show progression. I need a frequency curve. Now, finally, it's important to put in mind that suppose I have the entire research, you must know 6 panelists. If you want to design study, you want to execute the study, I usually end up by saying that there are these 6 panelists that you must put in mind, and you must be able to satisfy them. If you are not able to satisfy them, then I'm sorry, you will not have the best. The first is the researcher. You have to consider yourself. This design I'm making, will I be capable enough to execute it? If no, it means that your design is dead on arrival. You are the one to execute it. If what you have presented, you will not be able to execute it. You know you don't have the expertise to execute it. And you don't also have, maybe you don't have capacity for looking for people who will assist you, like co-supervisors and all that, to execute such study. Then that's not a study for you. The second is the subject. I am a plant biologist. I'm an ecophysiologist. But because I'm an ecophysiologist, really doesn't give me expertise in animal ecophysiology. So if I want to design a study, I couldn't design any study in ecophysiology that's centered on interrelationship between animals and the environment. No, that's not my area. So the subject is also important. And then the financier. I have said before, when you design your study about a budget. You don't design a project about a project. You design a project about the budget. You must be able to first see how much is available to execute this project before you start the design. Then you also have the decision maker. The person who is going to give you this money. The person who is going to access who is going to assess your proposal, the decision maker. What does he want? What conditions did he set for presenting this proposal? You also have to look at that. And unfortunately, sometimes when guys write proposals, they don't really go deep down to, say, for example, I want to write a proposal. I see an advert from, say, WHO. I just pick that proposal and start writing, not minding what WHO is, what they stand for, and what really they want regarding that research. So,
hi, Prof. We are running short on time.
Oh, okay. I'm already running off. This is my last slide.
All right, sir.
So, having to know who the decision maker is important. And then the recipient, those who will be at the receiving end, who will receive your stuff. But incidentally, the last person is the person you don't know, the unknown person. So sometimes when you also do study, you also put in mind the unknown person. And I know some of us, just to put it jokingly, we are already used to the unknown gunmen, to put that lightly. In your research design, you always have the unknown factor. Always put that at the back of your mind, because there definitely must be extraneous factor that will militate against the success of your study plan. I want to thank all of you for listening. To give a lecture on design or research analysis, a 20-minute lecture, I can assure you will not be enough. But I am sure that if you take, again, these slides will be available to all of you. I'm sure if you take a look at each of the points I have raised, then you source information, probably from literature, from the internet, or the absolute contact you for that information. Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Azenge.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much for the exclusive lecture. We appreciate it so much. Always, when we have you on turn, you're always giving us top notch. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
At this juncture, I would like to take questions. Does anyone have a question? We are short on time, but we can squeeze in 1 or 2 questions as quick as possible. If anyone has a question, you want to type it or ask it directly, can we have you? Meanwhile, Dr. Taufik, we can be getting ready for certificate presentation. We need to round up at 2 on the dot. So, yeah. Any question? Anyone have a question?
Exactly, my question is already answered, sir, because in the course of the flyer, he said you teach us on publication, how to publish on signs and all that. I have not actually gotten any of that. I said after this, that
Sorry,
was not report.
I can hardly hear you. I can hardly hear you.
Maybe network.
Coming in.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
I said to appreciate the presenters and the organizer of the conference of this workshop. I really appreciate. But you said you give us the link and we should send to the email posted in the, on the page. I've done that. So it's not for you. Just to remind you, that's what I'm saying. That's the only thing.
No, sure. Mr. Moses Azenge, I think you guys will take it up from there. I've already sent the slides to your email.
Yes, sure. We will.
Yeah.
We will.
So you share with them.
All slides or presentation and certificates will be sent to mails. Quickly, we will want to move forward. Thank you very much, sir. We are short on time. We will, in fact, if we have some question, we'll follow up with the mail.
It's okay.
Yes, sir. All right. So we'll move quickly into certificate presentation. Dr. Bello, are you still around? All right, we'll be moving into certificate presentation, and Dr. Beckley, while I have you, I'd like to invite you to please present this certificate to Dr. Dyke. Is Dr. Dyke around?
Still here.
All right, now, Dr. Dyke, this is your certificate. Dr. Beckley is going to present it to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right, Dr. Beckley, can you go on?
Yeah. What am I supposed to do?
Yes, present the certificate to him. All right, you just
okay.
Say
I should present to you.
Yes, present to him. Present, Dr. Beckley. Present.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Dyke, good to do this. On behalf of the on behalf of the organizers, I present to you. I can hardly read it. Your certificate.
Okay.
I hope we collaborate more. I'll send you an email.
Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you, sir. Great to meet you. I hope we'll meet in person one of these days.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So why I still have the both of you, like Dr. Dyke to present the certificate of Dr. Beckley to him. So please, Dr. Dyke, can you do us the honors?
Oh yeah, well, it's my great pleasure to Dr. Beckley to present you with this certificate. Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. I missed about 10 minutes because I had to take my son to drop him off somewhere, but thank you very much.
Okay.
Here's your certificate. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you again. All right, moving on. Dr. Bello, are you around? All right, we'll take quick announcement. We have other presentations, but due to time, I think we were supposed to plan on extending our time, but our webmaster have not responded, so we're still waiting on him. However, Dr. Taufik, is there any other announcements? Is there announcements?
No, not at all, not at all.
All right. Okay, so can you go ahead and do a vote of thanks, Dr. Taufik?
Okay, thank you very much. On behalf of the entire team, it's my pleasure to appreciate Dr. Dyke for his presentation, as well as our master, as well as our master, Professor Berkeley Kajekwe. Both of them have actually exposed us to a lot of information that we would, at our individual schedule, be able to review. And one thing is sure is for them to, they are ready to avail us of further interaction. So let's know this is very, very key. They are ready to support us. As soon as end the session, we can easily converse via email, via WhatsApp, and every other channel. So on behalf of Dr. Akimogaji Fagbemi, Professor Adedeji, my brother Azenge Moses, and the entire team, I'm very appreciative of the effort that has been placed in ensuring that the overall success of the meeting today. We also appreciate our webmaster, Mr. Man, for his efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. We thank everybody. Thank you, Dr. Taufik. Dr. Taufik is a facilitator and the team lead for CAPS Innovation. Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate everyone on behalf of Dr. Bello and myself. We just want to thank you all for joining us. Certificates and materials will be sent to your mailbox. For those who registered, we have your mail. We will fax all the details to you. So thank you very much for joining us on this session. We are grateful. We hope that when next we have something else, you'll be available to join. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you very much. This is the end of this session.
Group photographs. Group photographs.
All right. Can we all unmute? Let's show our videos to take a group photograph as quick as possible. Yes, just on your video. Everyone, could you on your video so we'll have yes. Yes, please.
So how do you organize the photograph now? You got moved already. So how is the photograph going to be organized?
Mute your video. Taking them to the next slide.
Yes, thank you very much. Perhaps I take it one more time. I'm using the Snapchat software. Let me take it one more time.
All right. Yeah, your video. Not taking.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. It will be shared via email.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye to everyone. Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. 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 Bye.
Thank you.